Okay, hello guys. Today we're working on an iPod Nano 7th generation. As you see, a cracked screen. And we're putting actually a black screen on it. That's what the customer wanted, so it's gonna look pretty different. But let's see what happens and let's see how it's done. Okay, so there's a couple of tools that you would need. Some blades, maybe a couple of playing cards. As usual, we use those a lot. A Phillips screwdriver. You'll need a heat gun, and maybe a few things that I'm forgetting right now. But let's just get right into it. So the first thing you want to do is remove this bottom plastic cover, because the screws that are holding the screen assembly are right underneath. So we just because it's plastic, but yet it's attached with the double-sided tape, I only want to give it a little bit of heat so I don't melt it. And then I'd say with a blade, with a flat blade, you can carefully lift it up. Try not to scratch the casing of the iPod or the actual plastic piece, and maybe give it a little more heat. Okay, as you see, there's also an antenna. I believe that would be either Wi-Fi or Bluetooth antenna, like that ribbon that's stuck. So you don't want to break that. Be very careful. And now we need to unscrew that one little screw here to remove the black plastic piece that the antenna is sitting on, just like that. And I don't think you can really fully remove it, because the cable, that yellow thing, is actually part of the antenna. It goes inside of the iPod, so all you need is basically access to the screws. As you see right here are the 2 regular Phillips screws that you want to unscrew right now. And that would be pretty much it as far as the initial screen removal. So now we need to warm up a little bit on the face of it, like the sides, the bottom and the top, and the whole thing will come up like that. And it's a little glued on the side, so heat is absolutely necessary here. Okay, so we'll start from the bottom. And then sometimes you also want to help the screen, kind of loosen up a little bit on the sides, on each side. What I'm trying to do is there's like a metal frame that the screen is attached to, and so I'm trying to, with my tool, I'm trying to get under that metal so that I get the whole assembly, because that metal also has the LCD screwed to it. So I'm trying to get the whole assembly out and not the screen alone, because it's just easier that way. I mean, sometimes it's, you know, no matter how hard you try, it still comes just the screen alone. But this time I'm trying to get both of them. Maybe a little more heat. Okay, so it's almost out. As you see, that's the metal frame that I was talking about, that the touchscreen is attached to. So I'm trying to not go between the frame and the screen, but actually go and under the frame and get the whole thing out without bending it too much. Now as you're approaching, I guess, the end of the removal procedure, try not to pull too hard upwards, because there's a bunch of ribbons right here, one for touch, one for LCD, and the battery, that can be broken if you're not careful. So take your time here, and as you see, I pulled it that way, in that direction, because you see that little lip that goes under the casing right here. And the power button flex got stuck to the frame too, so let's carefully separate that. I'll probably use a pair of tweezers for that. Okay, and just like that. Yeah, that's a very fragile cable. You don't want to cut it accidentally. So yeah, just part it off. Okay, so now we have to unplug the two connectors. As you see right here, the one for touch, one for the LCD. 1, 2. Unfortunately, there's no plug for the battery. It's soldered to the motherboard. So usually I actually unsolder that just to make it a safer repair, and then solder it back. And I think I'm actually going to have to do that here, just to again make sure we have no power related accidents while we work on this iPod. Okay, so you just put a little bit of flux on the joint, and then carefully there's 3 connection points total, so try not to short them with the tip of the iron. Just do one at a time very carefully. Like I'm pulling ever so slightly with my tweezers on the ribbon, and at the same time I'm warming up the connection points just so that they get loose. Maybe a little bit more flux. Okay, so the battery is unsoldered or desoldered. I'm just inspecting, making sure there are no problem areas there anywhere. So we can put that aside for now, and all we need is this part for now. So the idea now is to warm up the screen again and separate, maybe I don't even need to warm it up anymore, and separate the broken glass from this metal framing, being very careful with the LCD's ribbon, because that is somewhere over here. So let's go. Let's just give it a little bit of a heat. I'll probably use a plastic card to separate the two. So this is not a sealed unit. It's not where LCD is actually glued permanently to the touch screen. This is still like old school, where you can separate one from the other and replace one or the other in case you need to. So that's a good point. Just a bit more heat. That old adhesive goes with the screen. We need to redo that. And okay, so you need to remember how the actual ribbon is folded and how it's like routed, or how it's fed through the whole assembly here, because you want to recreate that with the new screen. So it basically goes through this opening right here, and then is like the actual cable is folded here in a zigzag shape like that. So you want to make sure you either memorize that or just keep that screen right next to you when you put the new one, so that you recreate that kind of shape exactly like it's in the original screen. Okay, so we got the LCD separated. And the frame, to be honest, is a bit flimsy, so there's almost no chance you can get it out perfect. It's a little bent, but it's easy to bend back into shape. So I'm just gonna clean up. Unfortunately, this little foamy seal has to go because it's broken a little bit. So we need to remove that. And of course, when you work with this whole assembly, keep in mind that this is a very fragile LCD, that if you apply a little bit extra pressure somewhere when you are prying the screen off, or any bending motion can cause the crack to the LCD, and basically you'll have to replace that part as well. So be very gentle with the part. Don't forget that it's not made of glass. It's very fragile plastic, basically, that can break fairly easily. Okay, so we'll put that aside for just a moment, and I'm gonna continue working on the screen assembly, because we still need to remove the home button from it, because as you remember, the new one comes without it. So we need to transfer that white button to the black screen and stick the actual clicker flex to the no, actually, sorry, this one, well, actually, yeah, that one has to be stuck to the new part. So let's warm it up a little bit. Not too much, because the button is plastic, so you don't want to melt it or make it lose its shape. So it's separated from the screen fairly easily. And now we need to just undo that part I'm trying to keep it in the same orientation as it is right now. So basically, I think we're done at this point with this part. We can put it aside. We don't need it anymore. So that's the way it goes. I'm keeping it like that. And so now, as you see, the flex that I was talking earlier about is flat right here. It's not like folded the way it's supposed to. So that's why you want to have that old screen for reference when you start folding these ribbons. Yeah, let's remove all these adhesives. So I'm putting this button back into place right here. Trying to be as precise as possible. Okay, so let's peel the protecting film off the bottom of the part. I'll put it aside. And now let's so you want to make sure that these little pins are like in line and parallel to the bottom, because they will have to match with these two openings when you assemble them. So you don't want to have them crooked or twisted. So now as you see, like that. So now I'm gonna try and redo the actual bending the way it's done on the original screen. So first it's bent right around this area where the cable splits into two. It's folded upward, and then about like, I don't know, 2/8 of an inch, it's folded the other way around. So it's like in a zigzag form. So I'm trying to recreate that. It doesn't need to be like super precise, but it's just so much easier if it's close enough. You wouldn't have to struggle with folding those cables inside of that assembly. So I bend the one fold, and now the second one fold, now the second fold. Like that. So that seems okay. So now let's prepare the new put the new tape on the frame. So now let's grab some new adhesive or new tape that we want to use here, and I'll start with the sides. Actually, let me grab a little cloth and I'll do a little bit of alcohol on it on the sides just to clean up all the oily residue and maybe some of that glue off. Okay, seems pretty clean. Now we just need to clean up. Actually, let's install the tape first, and then we'll clean up all the smudges that we caused to the LCD. Cut it. The other side. I think on the top we're safe to use the second thickness, the 2 millimeters. It doesn't need to be all the way up, because remember that part goes under the housing on the top. There's only a little bit like that. Now here you got to be a little creative and try to follow the shape as much as you can, but don't, you don't need to really like recreate the full the shape to the little detail. Just as long as you have some adhesive all over the area, more or less, it'd be safe. So I'm putting a little thicker, maybe even this one. Yeah, we have them in all different sizes, so that's why it's easy. But you can basically put a few lines right here instead of one wide one like that. It doesn't really matter as long as you have the area covered. Oh. Okay. So now a little bit in here. And I think a 1 millimeter or maybe a 2 millimeter on the bottom. Okay, so we're pretty much done with all the adhesive here, and I'm just gonna clean up the LCD. Okay, perfect. So now let's install the screen finally onto the frame and assemble the iPod. So I'm removing all these protective papers from the adhesive. Okay, so now that all the adhesive is ready to be applied, just doing a final cleaning on the screen. Okay, so there is a protective film on top of the surface here on the inside of the screen, so you want to remove that first. Okay, so now we feed the cable through this opening right here. Like that, carefully. And over here on the other side, you want to make sure you're not catching it under the frame anywhere, and that your home button, the two little pins, are perfectly matching the circles on the frame. Okay, so and the cable is all the way out on both sides. We're not catching it under, you see, we're not catching it under the frame. That's good. Now just a tiny bit of alignment. And a tiny bit of pressure. It would still be probably aligned a little more once we put it in the housing, but for now, just make sure it's all straight. There are no there's no dust underneath the screen. I'm still not removing the final piece of film just for now. So, and that's how the cables were, just like that. So let's solder the battery back on, connect the screen, and test it. So here's our iPod. And let's zoom in a little bit. Okay, so here you also want to make sure you fold it kind of similar to the way it was. So if it's like that when it's fully assembled, then basically it needs to be like that. It's soldered like that. So it's a little tricky, but just make sure you solder it the proper way. Just some flux. Again, try not to short the pins with the soldering iron. Just do one connection point at a time. So I guess for that you need a tip small enough so that it doesn't go above both. Seems good enough for me. I'm just gonna clean the excess flux with a Q-tip and a little bit of alcohol, not a whole lot, just a tiny bit. Okay, just like that. I want to make sure that that cable is all flat on the housing. And so the two remaining cables are our LCD and the touchscreen. Let's connect those and power up the iPod. It has to have that distinct click as usual. Okay, we got the Apple. Let's see if the touch works. Okay, it's in some Asian language. Let's see if the touch works all the way. See, I can drag the icon all over the place and it's not jumping, it's not wiggling, or I'm not losing the connection. It's following my motion precisely. So that's a good touch screen test. If you drag it and it loses somewhere along like a horizontal line, then it means that there should be just either a loose connection or maybe a defective screen. The same for vertical. If you try to drag the icon from left to right up, and somewhere at one point it just like jumps back into the place, it means that there is a vertical line that is not working, and basically that if the reconnection doesn't help, then most likely got a defective screen and it has to be returned back to your vendor or the seller. So at this point I will screw it back together. I will mention though that on this side, on this corner, right corner, there was a little bit of glue when we originally took it apart. So I am going to put a tiny bit of glue here just to keep it safely like glued down, or stay. Even if we have to take it apart in the future, that glue is not going to be a problem because I'm not using a super glue, but more of a generic like Craftsman quick grip glue that we use in different applications. So just a tiny bit. You don't need to put a whole lot because it will just make it so much more messy. And I'll just clean up a few bits of old glue here as well. Actually, you can put that glue on both sides because I see there was a little bit of glue on the left side as well. I'll just clean both surfaces just to make sure the glue has the proper surfaces to set on, and just a tiny drop on each side will be perfect. And then if you have I would also recommend using some sort of a clamp or something, or maybe put it in between a couple of books so that it's pressed down for a little bit while the glue is setting. That would be ideal. So just a tiny bit on this side, like so, and that side. closing it down slowly. Okay, so let me put the 2 screws in the bottom that we're holding the frame right here. And I'm applying slight downward pressure while I'm screwing it to make sure that it's fully pressed and the screen is not going to be lifting, or the frame at least. So now I can screw this last screw as well. And it has some glue on it as well, the old glue that was holding the plastic cover. So you can either use the glue or you can use adhesive, double-sided tape. I would not recommend using super glue at all, but the same glue will probably work. Although I will use the double-sided adhesive. So I'm putting the adhesive all the way from one side to the other, cutting it with a sharp blade, X-Acto knife. Again, be careful if you cut it like that, make sure you don't cut the actual antenna. So I'm making sure I'm following the shape exactly or precisely. On this side and now on the top side. Okay, so I have adhesive on both sides, and I'm trying to cover as much surface as possible to get the most stable and secure attachment. So now that it's all there, I'm just pressing one more time. And let's see if this one has any glue residue. Not really, it's perfectly clean. So I'm just removing the papers. And that would be our final touch. Putting this thing on. And just clean up a little bit of glue or tape residue that's showing up here. Okay, looks like the battery just died, so but that completes the repair. Here's an iPod Nano 7th generation screen replacement. Actually looks pretty cool with the black screen, I should say. I'm sure they'll like it. Well, actually that was their choice anyway, so but they will definitely love it. So that's how it's done. Again, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Thank you, and I'll see you on the next one.